I just heard a fantastic presentation from the roundtable that inspired me to recognize that the AI gods are conspiring against me. My phone died, I could not use my GPT, and I could not feed your PowerPoint slides into it, nor could I take your auditory comments and figure out a way to summarize this. So I'm gonna have to go old school, which means I'm gonna have to use my memory. And memory is a very faulty thing for somebody my age, and also I think for all of us who are typically now trying to use these tools. But we talked about codependencies as a problem. I'm gonna break free and remember something for us here. Just a minute. So this second annual conference of AI Futures continues to bring new ideas and new people to the table. And one of the things that I'm finding the most inspiring about this particular conference was that we really, by picking our theme of agency, threaded through a lot of the conversations what it means to remain engaged, what we said, productively, with friction, with a degree of clarity about where we're going with these tools and how we're going to use them and accommodate them as a part of our learning experiences. The last roundtable for me, I'll go in reverse order, grabbed my attention for two reasons. The first reason was that we saw faculty from different parts of the university sitting together and talking about what's on their mind, what they're experiencing, the challenges they have, but also the opportunities that they're beginning to, I would say, play with creatively to make sense. Of course, the law faculty had to mention the policy that comes from ELTE, and I have to say I read that on page about 2 weeks ago, and I thought it was an interesting policy, and I have in fact been talking with other universities, including our own, as much as I can, that policy tends to bring a hammer to a nail. It tries to find a problem, and policy will try to address the problem. The challenges you mentioned in that roundtable is that many of these problems are not regulatory, they're not policy, and they're not even necessarily disciplinary. They can be, but they're not necessarily. They're actually embedded in the problem of pedagogy, what it means to teach well, and what it means to guide, in one case, special education teachers on how they can become better teachers. So for some of us, it's how do you become a better lawyer. For others, it's how do you become a special education teacher. For others, it's how do you become somebody who works in the media, the arts, and participate in society in productive and exciting ways. It is almost impossible for me to forget that the two presentations we heard from our co-organizers, Tilla and Laszlo, really helped us to see that the European Union and the OECD and other organizations across this globe are scrambling, but also in some cases succeeding, with frameworks that can begin to make sense for all of us at a high level, what we're seeing in our various particular circumstances. And I was impressed, and I learned actually a bit about why I might take seriously, even if I'm a US citizen and I'm working in a different context in North America, what's going on in Europe, and how Europe is beginning to make sense of policy. I also was kind of shocked and stunned by the parallels with Laszlo's presentation about things like friction and what we're calling productive struggle, and the question of cognitive offloading and delegation. We talked about should we share our slides in advance to make sure we were on point and we didn't repeat ourselves. And actually, I think it was a good thing we didn't share, because what I learned from you was that we have more work to do in our field, particularly with Carrie and I's work, on really drilling down on those concepts and beginning to connect them more to cognitive theory, for example. So there's lots of fruitful work to be done with ideas that were brought to this conference for the next year and the year after. I think the last thing I'd like to say is sort of last but not least, I'm going to take advantage of the time, we probably have a few minutes, to note that this was a picture that we showed to kick this conference off. We said, you know, in a happy world, when we asked Gemini, like we did yesterday, show us a picture of students working with AI in a environment that would seem inviting. The AI was quite glad to tell us, here's that picture. And we did learn, and we do know, that the algorithms that use predictive, essentially, claims around what the next token is, or the next keyword, or the next closest word, the most associated word, all of that stuff can now be applied not only to text, but to image, and who knows where else it goes with body kinesthetic in the future. I mean, right now we're in cognition, we're in affect, we're in pictures, we're in text. Maybe we're going to be in the world of Musk and robots who are responding to us in body kinesthetic cues in the kinds of movies that we showed earlier as predictions of the future. But this happy picture, which to me looks pretty reasonably happy, I tried to bring a dark side to it since that's the theme. And by the way, being an honorary Hungarian, anyone who doesn't know that pessimism is your best friend, doesn't know Socrates, doesn't know that knowing thyself often means knowing what one doesn't know. And I think Hungarians are always leaders in helping us to be very critical about the promises of pictures like this. We put this picture up at the beginning of the conference to shock. Now, you may see it as a shock value game, but I would suggest that we are, in fact, still under-theorized, even after the second annual conference, on the role of behaviorism and the rise of neo-behaviorism into our not only systems, not only our machines, not only our tools, not only our interactive services, generative, in fact, but that we also don't really take seriously, not the consequences of whether they know how to do our lesson planning well without AI, or whether they know how to turn in a dissertation that hasn't been completely manufactured with the use of the tool, or whether even in a law case I can trust a lawyer who knows enough case law in my own country to not rely on the GPT to give it the answer that why would I have even bothered to hire that lawyer? I can go to AIlawyer.com and I can get the same result much faster, much cheaper, and I do not need a human to mediate it and waste my time with a lot of verbal talk. That's not the world we want to be in, but I think that's the world we could be in if we are all being trapped in some kind of belief that there's something like this going on, but in fact, underneath the architecture is something not just more sinister, but frankly, just more basic. This is a theory of interaction. This is a theory of what goes on. If I had an interactive AI, which I might have next year, that rat will move, and inside its head will be a space called schema. Why things sink and float. Do I understand intuitively why they do? Do I have a P-prim? Do I have a misconception? Oh, maybe I have a misconception, but it's building on experience, which is helping me to see that buoyancy is not necessarily related to what I thought it was, which is size and weight. All that mixture of material inside that rat's brain, I can't see right now because it's invisible to me. It's a black box. And that's, I think, one of the things that we're also having to deal with is how much can we know epistemologically about what we want to know regarding how our students think, how they perform, how they do. We don't want them there. We might want them closer to here, but maybe we want something even different than these two images. Maybe we want 1,000 images and 1,000 flowers blooming. One thing that is totally clear from this conference so far is that we are, in fact, in a paradigm shift. And that if you just read Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions and you just start substituting words and concepts, pretty quickly you realize anomalies are happening, crises are appearing in all sorts of institutions, including our higher education ones. And what that means is that we don't quite know how to approach what we thought we knew, not just generationally, like I'm older, you're younger, and therefore I don't get it. That's not the problem. I think actually younger people are confused as well. They don't know what's authentic. They're not even sure whether their voice matters. They're so used to being told that the social media environment they live in has as much to say about who they are as their parents, their teachers, their counselor, perhaps even their priest or rabbi. So we're in a very strange world where we're talking as if the society wasn't radically changing and that we weren't all facing those changes in different pockets of our lives when we leave this room. I think our next theme eventually should be, what's the real world got to do with it? And what I mean by real world is those things outside of academia. We tried last year to bring in corporate folks. We tried to have them talk a little bit about what business is seeing. That's too narrow. It's more than just that. It's a mediated experience of the universe that has a lot to do with how machines can aid and support us. And in that solution set, we still find ourselves dealing with paradoxes. We just heard efficiency mentioned by our group. There are benefits to GPTs. They can create efficiencies, and that is true. But efficiency is not neutral. It reorganizes what counts as time and effort and attention. And therefore, what counts as learning for young people who are novices. So again, we're back in this kind of place where we're gaining efficiencies while we're simultaneously losing certain kinds of approaches to what we might call integrated experience. Key to this whole story is novices aren't experts, and what might be efficient for them would not be the same as what is efficient for us. So I think we need to push next year as well on the novice-expert distinction. Those who are purporting to know something about something and those who are learning as apprentices that thing. And how do we build bridges between these worlds? What some of us would call learning progressions. We also have an access and bypass paradox. There's more access than ever, and we know darn well that for students with disabilities, for students with language challenges, with students with cognitive processing, these tools matter and we need to get them in their hands. On the other hand, we know that just because you got access didn't mean you learned something about, in Bloom's language, synthesis, analysis, higher order thinking. You might have gotten access to lower order, task-oriented thinking, but you didn't get the challenge of puzzling on a problem. Why is Hungary's constitution different than the United States'? Now, I could go to the professor and take that class. It's called constitutional law. Maybe it's called comparative. I even probably know some of the professors at Columbia and Berkeley who would teach it along with my colleague. Do I need to listen to them tell me what it is based on their accumulated knowledge, or do I need to simply bypass that and go get my solution for the exam? And if my solution for the exam includes more access, what have I gained? So there must be multiple forms of access, and there must be ways of differentiating their meaning for learning. Agency, our theme. Agency is not lost, and I think that's true. People who say that these machines kill our agency, that's not true. What's true is that they redistribute and they change the forms and terms of our agency. They have us start to think in different ways about who we are as we interact, as students, as faculty, and as other sorts of white-collar workers. Working with novices, again, we have to remember that children are developing agency. They don't have it. They don't not have it or have it. They're developing it. And our job traditionally has been to support student development of things like agency. How do we recover that sense without being lost in the promise of interpassivity, the promise of cognitive offloading, the promise of delegation, which usually all centers back on efficiency? Authenticity and augmentation paradox. We want help, we want the pictures, we want the images, we want to polish up our PowerPoints, we want to come to that graduate seminar ready to go, we want to prove that we know what we know. But if everything can be generated, manufactured, and reproduced at scale by these particular machines, then we're probably going to have to do exactly what we heard, actually earlier in our roundtable, which is find other ways to show what I know, which might include oral recitation, oral argument, oral discussion, oral participation, not simply the generation of text or images. We're going to have to defend and demonstrate that we know things in ways other than with GPTs, if we're going to hold on to the learning enterprise. So our solution was this, you've seen it. But I think what we really came away with from today's incredible conference, thank you, organized by ELTE, hosted by ELTE, supported by ELTE, and inviting some of us from San Jose State University in California to join, is a continued collaboration that, as Attila said, may be another part of our last stand as academics. If we don't meet face-to-face, and if we don't fly the flight, and we don't get across the airport, and we don't show up, and we're not here, we're not present, we can't talk, there may be something that we've lost in the experience of what you call school in quotes, or the university. But I think this is, again, part of the paradigm shift. We're not going to end up in a virtual world, no matter how much, I was going to say Dr. Zuckerberg, but he doesn't have a PhD, does he? Sorry. Does he have an MBA? I think he got partly one at Harvard. we're in different worlds because it turns out we don't have the same challenges. We in this group want to challenge ourselves. We want to push. We want to go deeper. We want to invite cross conversations with colleagues outside of education and psychology. But we're still, I would say, here together. And my worry is that if we lose faith or hope in our own ability to collaborate, to communicate, to be authentic in person, we may end up also giving away the keys to the gate. So I'm going to leave on a hopeful note and say, next year, along with Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back, we'll be back, and we will try our best to continue the conversation as people can learn from each other. Thank you so much, everybody. We had a great session. We appreciate everybody. Have a great rest of your evening.